San Francisco, the new mayor, London Breed, walked the streets today, the same streets she's vowed to clean up. Now, at one point, she and her staff walked right by a man who appears to be prepping a needle. You see it right there.
How's everybody doing? My name is Anthony Brian Logan, and today we got to talk about San Francisco, California. This city has become a mess. It's really a shame. We're going to get to a video where you have the new mayor of San Francisco, who you just saw before I started rolling, London Breed, taking a nice little stroll through the city to examine what's going on there. Warning, if you are faint of heart, if you don't like seeing human feces, drug paraphernalia, I suggest you don't watch this particular portion of the video because it has all that stuff in there and more as far as information is concerned that might kind of disturb you. But what you're about to see is a result of what happens when you have, number one, a state that has a climate that is a magnet for homeless people. It's not going to rain too much. It's pretty sunny. It's not going to get cold with snow and stuff like that. And also just to other policies, really lax on drugs, a lot of, pseudo NGOs that are out there providing things for these people, a sanctuary city. All those things create an environment that is ripe for this type of disgusting behavior. So what I'm going to do right now is go ahead and roll the clip. After we get done with the clip, I'll talk about what was said and shown in the clip, and then I'll give you a little bit more insight as to how I feel about this personally. So without further ado, let's go ahead and roll it.
In San Francisco, the new mayor, London Breed, walked the streets today, the same streets she's vowed to clean up. Now, at one point, she and her staff walked right by a man who appears to be prepping a needle. You see it right there. Mayor Breed, who grew up in the city as well, plans to clean up San Francisco in part by opening the nation's first supervised injection site. That's where people can shoot up their own drugs indoors under supervision instead of on the streets. The city's health department had hoped to open 2 sites by July, but it's clear now that San Francisco will not meet that goal, and the new mayor couldn't tell us when those sites will open. Earlier this year, our investigative unit, one of our reporters, Begad Shaban, took us to Vancouver in Canada to show us how those sites work. His ongoing investigation into San Francisco's disease streets really exposed the alarming amount of drug, needles, trash, and feces on our streets. Tonight, Begad sits down with the mayor in her first one-on-one interview since taking office. Begad.
Well, one of the mayor's main ideas to clean up San Francisco focuses on nonprofits that already help the homeless. She says those organizations that receive money from the city, should do a better job to educate the homeless to, quote, clean up after themselves. You're a native of San Francisco. Is this the worst you've seen it?
I will say that there's more feces on the sidewalks than I've ever seen, growing up here. That was something that wasn't the norm.
That you've ever seen?
Than I've ever seen, for sure. And that is a huge problem. And we're not just talking about from dogs, we're talking about from humans.
How can a city with some of the most expensive rent prices in the world also have neighborhoods that are being compared to actual slums because of the amount of human feces, trash, and needles everywhere?
There are a lot of people who have been pushed out of some of these places where you now have people paying these prices. About 70% of the people who are estimated to be homeless now in San Francisco were actually housed in San Francisco before they became homeless. We have to make sure that people who live here, sadly people who are homeless here, that they're also held accountable for taking care of our streets. This is our home.
What do you mean by that?
Like, for example, I met with service providers in District 5 in the Haight-Ashbury community. And one of the things that I said to them is, you work with many of these individuals. I work hard to make sure that your programs are funded for the purposes of trying to get these individuals help. And what I am asking you to do is work with your clients and ask them to at least have respect for the community, at least clean up after themselves and show respect to one another and people in the neighborhood.
Are you talking about harsher penalties?
I didn't express anything about a penalty. I just solicited their help in trying to talk to their clients who unfortunately were mostly responsible for the conditions of the streets.
Mayor London Breed says those of us who live here in San Francisco should expect to see a cleaner city within 3 months of her administration. She wouldn't give specifics on how to measure that benchmark, but promises we'll all be able to see a difference by mid-October. Now, just to give you some perspective here, the number of complaints to the city's 311 hotline about human feces scattered across neighborhoods has doubled in just the past 3 years.
Okay, so you see what's going on there. You saw everything. Now, that was disgusting. I warned you. Hopefully you didn't lose your lunch or anything, but it was nasty. It was really nasty. San Francisco, at this point, looks worse than third world Africa, India. I mean, really crazy. At least in the poorest parts of Africa, they have the decency to defecate in a hole in the ground or in a sewer system, not just on the ground where people got to walk. I mean, come on. You have garbage, feces, needles all mixed together. I saw a study a few months ago that said that they've removed tons of garbage, feces, all of that in San Francisco. I mean, they have roving trucks that basically go through and collect all that stuff. It is a health hazard. You saw a woman walking with her daughter right next to a junkie get ready to bang a needle in the middle of the day. Okay, and she's looking at him. She's like within arm's reach. What if he has a mental problem and decides to reach out and touch her or poke her with a needle? You know, this, I'm not just talking about things in a exaggerated way, because there have been examples of when children, you know, they're at a playground and then all of a sudden a needle is right in front of their face. They accidentally touch it. Now they got to go get a shot and get tested for HIV. Do you want to live in a place like this? This is what happens when you have very lax drug laws, in my humble opinion, because there's no reason why you should have people outside just banging needles and there's no kind of enforcement on them when you're talking about a criminal penalty. In the interview, Ms. Breed was talking about, well, I didn't say there would be any kind of penalty. Well, look, if there's not going to be a penalty against these people who are out here banging needles, leaving them on the ground, defecating on the ground, then it's not going to stop. And then on top of that, you have these little pseudo NGOs, non-governmental organizations that come in and so-called help these people. They give them food, they give them clean needles, they give them blankets, they give them clothing, they give them sometimes cash, a lot of different things that makes it a more attractive place to be if you're homeless. Just because you're homeless does not mean you just happen to be in San Francisco, get kicked out of your house, and it's like, okay, now I'm on the street. People travel to places to be homeless. Okay. I mean, prime example, what if you live in Stockton or somewhere far away from San Francisco, somewhere, you know, in the middle of nowhere, and you're homeless there? Why not just travel 2 or 3 hours to San Francisco and be homeless there? I mean, you can travel. There's all kind of ways. You got prostitutes that hop on the truck and they get a ride, or just regular people that get a ride in the truck. They may hop on a train car illegally and go to where they have to go. They might ride a bike. Sometimes people that are homeless have vehicles and they drive there. Now, they may live in their car in the middle of nowhere, but rather than living in their car in the middle of nowhere, they can go to San Francisco, sell their car, and they have enough money for drugs. I mean, people do these things. It may seem kind of far-fetched and crazy when I'm saying it, but this is not outside of the norm. This is what happens when you have an environment that has basically no rules. I mean, where are the rules against defecating on the ground? Where are the rules against the drug use, the open drug use? And now they want to have dope houses sponsored by the government. They want to have one. I think they opened one, and then we'll have another one. So they want to have 2 government-sponsored dope houses in San Francisco. Now, I don't know about you, but if I lived in San Francisco, I would not want to live right by there because of the kind of people that you're going to attract who are at these places. You're talking about the dregs of society, the worst of the worst. I mean, you're talking about pedophiles, pimps, prostitutes, people that have mental illness. If you're mentally ill, I understand that may not be your fault, but I mean, you don't want that as a citizen to be right next to you. Not in my backyard, for real. Think about it. If you get all these people that are congregating around this place to have a drug addiction, they're not going to be in the right state of mind when they're using their drugs. Okay. If you have mental illness, layer on top of that or underneath it, whatever you want to look at it as, it's recipe for disaster. you're encouraging people to come to one place that all have a lot of different problems that center around drugs. This is why I say we should not be legalizing drugs, because this is the result of legalizing drugs. You're going to have areas like this where you're talking about worse than third world Africa, worse than third world India type of conditions. Feces on the ground, needles everywhere. It's unsanitary because these people, a lot of times they're going to restaurants, they're eating. I mean, this is how you have the hepatitis outbreak, the measles, mumps, or whatever. And you have a bunch of illegal immigrants in San Francisco, and these people don't have any kind of immunization shots. So disease is going to break out in a place like that. It already has. So I'm not speaking in a way, like I said before, I'm not speaking in an exaggerated way. Disease has already broken out in these places in California where you have all of this stuff mixed together. Beautiful weather, it doesn't rain, basically no drug laws, sponsored drug use by the government. They allow you to shoot needles. I mean, look, if the government says you can come in here and shoot your drugs up and it's okay, we want to arrest you, then at that point you have legal drugs. But do you want to live in San Francisco? Is that where you want to be? It's a lot of money there. And that's kind of weird how you have these people, usually liberals, to talk about income inequality. And they say, well, it's too big. Republicans won't make it bigger. But I always see a big income inequality in these very liberal areas. Chicago is a beautiful city if you happen to not live in the black area. Okay. And same thing with San Fran. If you live in a nice part of town, it's okay for the most part. I mean, the feces and drugs are kind of spreading all over everywhere. But people that live there and can afford to live there, not just on the street, on the ground, but actually in a house, these are your very rich people. But right outside, you have the poorest of the poor, drug addicted, trying to escape the drugs, people that live in public housing. It's just like a dystopian future we're seeing right now, right in front of our eyes. So I hope that they break away from the rest of California and allow them to manifest their own destiny, because nobody wants to live like that. I never seen anything like that here on the East Coast. I've seen some drug use, I've seen some violence, but the tent cities, the feces, the urine, the needles, people using drugs openly right in front of the mayor on camera in the middle of the day. You go on the BART station, the subway station, people banging needles right there in the middle of the day. And there's not anything really done about it. It's really a shame. But this is what is happening to California, unfortunately. Extremely liberal policies, legalizing drugs, legalizing just rampant homelessness. You need to crack down on the homelessness, really, honestly. And the way you can do that is by cracking down on these so-called NGOs to make a lot of money by enabling the homeless problem. These people that live in Orange County, Los Angeles, Skid Row, San Francisco, they often come from other places. They're not just native people, especially Los Angeles. People that come from all over the country trying to be an actor, actress, or whatever, oftentimes end up right there on the street. And Skid Row, at least, is 80 to 90% black, but it's allowed to fester, and it's enabled by outside forces, by these pseudo NGOs and also the government of the actual place. In San Fran, they're talking about legal shooting galleries. I mean, come on. But that's pretty much all I got. So what do you think? Do you think the problem in San Francisco can be resolved? The drugs that are allowed to just go rampant, the feces, the urine on the ground that's allowed to go rampant, people that are being sponsored and subsidized by these outside forces and also internal forces, can that be fixed? Or am I wrong here? Is it okay that these people just lie in the streets of San Francisco, banging needles, harassing regular people, mentally ill, rather than giving all these people so much money to allow them to stay on the streets and allowing them to be homeless and allowing them to bang their needles in front of police officers? There should be some actual cash given to removing these individuals and to mental health. If you're going to spend money, spend it on that, then you'll be able to cut down on the homeless problem rather than making it fester year after year. But whatever your comments are, please let me know in the comments below. And that's all I got to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, share, and subscribe. Peace.